Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. This is quite the turnout, very overwhelming. I really do appreciate it. And I want to start out by thanking Iris, as always, for opening up her home and for hosting what I think will be very inspiring, very meaningful classes about the topic of Pirke Abot. I started with the idea of Pirke Abot as being our base. It's the wisdom of all of our rabbis. And of course, we'll go in a lot of different directions. I envision this as being a class where people could, it's a good thing it was your sister-in-law, all right? I envision this as being a class where we can share openly. It's not a monologue, it's hopefully a conversation and opening, and we'll ask questions and it'll be open for everybody. Today's class is L'Fuah Shenema of several people, Liao ben Rachel, Chaya Sarah bat Simcha, Rachel Sarah bat Jemila, and Mordechai ben Yafa. May Hashem send them all L'Fuah Shenema speedily. So the topic that I wanted to start out with first is something that I feel is so important to our lives, but doesn't get spoken about a lot. Everybody knows it and how important it is, but it's not something that I think we're always cognizant of on a day-to-day basis. And that's the idea of shalom, the idea of peace. And peace takes on a lot of different forms. There's inner peace, peace with oneself. There's peace with one's spouse and children and family. And then there's peace between community members, friends, neighbors. And of course, there's general peace throughout the world. And peace is so important to us that it finds its way into so much of our prayers. So for example, the last blessing of the Amidah every single day is Sim Shalom, give us peace. And in all of the different forms that I just mentioned. We always end off our Amidah and our Kaddish with Oseh Shalom b'mromav. Let Hashem make peace from the heavens to everywhere. Because without inner peace, without peace amongst other people, a person really has nothing. A person will have all the materialism in the world, but if they're unsettled, if they're anxious, if they're nervous, if they're fighting, if every day they come home and they're arguing with their spouse or they're debating their children, or they just don't have that peace of mind about themselves, then really what do you have? And so peace is such an important thing. And we could talk about it in so many different ways, and I'll see what we come up with. But I have one particular thing in mind that I wanted to talk about with peace, and I want to illustrate it using a story. So there was a story about a rabbi. He was a Hasidic master. He was born in 1785 in Poland and died in 1825. His name was Rabbi Avraham Yehoshua Heschel. And he tells the following story. It's recorded in Chacham Ovadiah's book on Pirke Avot. A very, very inspiring idea. He says one day, it was right after Pesach, a student of his came into his study, and the student said, I'm thinking of divorcing my wife. I want to separate. I'm not happy with what's going on. The rabbi said, I'm so sorry to hear that. What's the issue? What is it that you're so upset about? He said, well, it came to a head on Pesach. My wife fed me matzah that was soaked in water, that had liquid on it. He said, I'm somebody who keeps to the law of gebrukst. Anybody know what gebrukst is? On Pesach trips of gebrukst? If I feel for you. If you've been on a Pesach trip that keeps gebrukst. Oh, really? Very interesting. So can you tell everybody what it is?
You're not allowed to have anything matzah that's like not even soaked, wet by any liquid. So like there's no matzah lasagna. There's nothing that you.
There's none of their menus, basically, right? No matzah pizza, no matzah cream cheese, no matzah charoset, no matzah nothing. It's matzah. That's it. You can't. It's a lot of potatoes. It's a lot of potatoes. So if anybody is signed up for a Pesach trip that is gebrukst, think of moving your money elsewhere. I'm just going to tell you for now, just for your family. Not that I don't, not that it's not a very fun and enjoyable trip, but if you're under one impression, you might get something very, very different. So this one student came into the rabbi and he said, could you believe it? My wife knows my tradition, knows my background. This is what we keep. And she fed me this, and it shows that she has just no respect for me. She doesn't care about my traditions. She doesn't care about the halacha. And I'm not interested in being with somebody like that. I want to separate from my wife. The rabbi heard this, and he thought of it. And he said, before you make any decisions, call my wife into the study. I want to ask her a question. The student went, called the rabbi's wife. rabbi's wife comes in, and the rabbi says to his wife, tell me what kind of matzah you fed to me this year on Pesach. The wife's face goes all red. She's embarrassed. She says, I don't really know if I want to answer that question. Husband says, don't worry. Tell me what type of matzah did you feed me on Pesach? And she says, well, listen, I didn't tell you about this, but something happened right before Pesach, and I wasn't able to feed you the matzah shemura, the type of matzah that we all eat on the night of the Seder, which according to many people is the obligatory matzah that you have to eat on Pesach. That's the one we all go, the handmade shmura matzah. She says, I didn't feed that one to you. He says, why not? She says, well, to be honest with you, and I wasn't planning on telling you, but before Pesach came, before the Seder arrived, just a couple of hours before, a poor person came and knocked on the door. And one of the children answered the door and didn't really know what to do. And he said, look, I don't have anything for Pesach. I don't have anything in matzah. I don't have anything. Can you give me something? And one of his children went into the closet and took out the shmur matzah that they had for the night of the Seder and handed it to the poor person. That was the only shmura matzah that they had. It was not enough time to go and buy and get. And she says, I got so nervous, I didn't know what to do. So I took the regular matzah that we had, and I found it, and I put it in, and I presented it to you as if it was shmura matzah. I'm so embarrassed, I'm so sorry. She says, I didn't feed you shmura matzah on the night of the Seder. The rabbi hears his wife's words, and he smiles, and he looks at the student. He says, you see, I knew my wife didn't feed me shmura matzah, but I'm not planning on divorcing her. I'd let it go. I knew that if she fed that to me, it means she had a good reason for it. She's not trying to undermine me. She's not trying to disrespect me. She's not caring of the mitzvot. She had a reason for it. Maybe a good reason, maybe not such a good reason, but it was worth it for me to keep my mouth shut so that I don't make any fighting between me and my spouse. I ate the regular matzah, and I knew what it was, and I ate it happily, and I kept my mouth shut and I didn't say anything. And so Talmud Vadia brings this story to show us the power of shalom is so great that it's even worth sometimes compromising on the strictness that we have, the levels of halakha which we keep in our minds in order to preserve shalom between two people. The language of the Mishnah in Pirke Abot, since it's a Pirke Abot class, I'll just read it to you, is that in the very first chapter, Hillel and Shammai, two very famous rabbis, Hillel says, be of the students of Aharon HaKohen, who love peace and chase peace and bring people close to the Torah. That's Hillel's advice, that a person should model themselves after Aharon HaKohen, the great high priest, who sought out to make peace between people, between spouses, between neighbors, and chased after that peace. And by doing so, was able to bring people closer to the Torah. He showed them the pleasantness, the sweetness of Torah. What happens when sometimes religion could actually cause a tremendous amount of fighting? I know it sounds crazy, but that was a sarcastic one. But yeah, we know all around us that there's a lot of infighting, that Jews just don't get along. And oftentimes it's our religious views that cause us to combat each other, despite the fact that we actually have more in common than we have less in common. But instead, we choose to highlight those differences that we have. You eat this type of dairy, and I eat that type of dairy, and you eat this type of meat, I eat that type of meat. And oftentimes, we don't even really know where those ideas come from. We just know that they're that, and we're this, and the two cannot coexist. They cannot interact with each other. And it becomes particularly difficult when it happens within a family. So I throw the question out to the panel, if anybody's interested. What do we do when one spouse wants to get more religious than the other spouse, wants to take on more things? One child in our family has become inspired and seeks to up their level of observance, and the rest of the family may not be on that page. What happens when we have tussles with our neighbors because our neighbors do one thing on Shabbat and we do something slightly different on Shabbat? How do we work through those? What do we do? How do we make peace? What should be our mindset? Any thoughts? Anybody experienced this themselves? Yes. Go ahead.
As long as you stay in your lane, I stay in my lane. I don't push you. You don't push me. And then together we raise our family in the same values and goal of ultimately Pirke Abot type of, the midot, but we don't push each other on our own personal level. Obviously in the home is kashrut, but on your own personal level, you say, I don't push you, you don't push me, and we respect each other.
Okay, interesting, right? So we don't impose ourselves on other people, especially if it's going to inconvenience them.
Something to elevate yourself, beautiful,
right?
Nice. Don't tell me to do this, and on the same note, don't reprimand me if I choose not to do.
Right.
I'm just throwing an example, not to go to minyan in the morning. Don't tell me. Don't reprimand me.
So everybody's got to just do things at their own speed, at their own pace, kind of. Yeah.
Individually, yes, but not as a family.
So let me throw a hypothetical question out, right? One member of the family says, I think we should really start eating only Chav Yisrael dairy.
That's a family decision. That's right. That's a family.
So how do the two work through it? The child is really bent. They want to do it. They think it's the right thing. They've been told by people that it's the right thing. Their family doesn't do it. How do the parties coexist? Julie?
I think sometimes it's weighing your battles, So let's say as a mother, you're not willing to change it, using your example in your house to Chalav Yisrael, but it's very important to your child. You can have both milks in the fridge. When you cook, you can make that effort to use Chalav Yisrael. I think it's just seeing how against my values is this and how tolerant can I be?
Okay.
You don't have to believe in something to respect someone else's
Right.
views.
So we're speaking to a group of mothers, right? And we all want what's best for our children, right? But we also have a willingness to keep things the way that we like them, right? We grew up a certain way. We're used to a certain type of lifestyle. And so people get nervous when someone starts to do something a little different than the way that they did it, right? And the way that they grew up. Why isn't what I did when I grew up enough, right? You often hear, well, we never did this before, right? That's a very common phrase. We never did this, right? I've had parents argue with me to death that certain things are not laws because they just never did it, right? And I have to try and, explain to them in a soft way that we're not saying that the people of the previous generation were bad, right? It wasn't that they weren't religious or anything of that nature, but we all know that as time goes on, we learn more, we grow more, our community changes, we evolve, and so things progress. So, our grandparents, for them, when they were at Bradley Beach on Tisha B'Av, it was, we go into the ocean beneath the knees. That's what they did. You talk to any of the grandparents, we only went in to the knees. That was our day on Tisha B'Av. That's how they recognized Tisha B'Av for them. And for them, that was a difference. That was a change, right? Now, are we all going to turn around and say that that's acceptable according to halakha? We can't say that it's acceptable according to halakha. The halakha is. It doesn't mean that I think any less of them. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm now in a position today in 2022 in the Syrian community that we currently live, where I can get an education, learn about Tisha B'Av, know what is right and wrong because they kept to that difference between the weekday and what Tisha B'Av was, because they at least kept some level of recognition of the day and passed that on. I'm now able to be on the shoulders of those giants, to be able to have the education that I have today, to be able to do that. So looking back and saying, well, we've never done this and we're going to do it now, it's not, if you do it the right way, an admission of, well, my grandparents were bad or my great-grandparents were bad. God forbid, we would never say such a thing. We're only here because of them and their credit and a credit to them. But it doesn't also mean that we can't learn more, educate ourselves, shift, change, and adapt to the things that we now know are correct according to halakha. And now, Baruch Hashem, we have opportunities and we have a community that is talking about these things and learning about it. We should not be against, right? Just as much as we have to tolerate the idea that there might be something for us to grow and to progress. It doesn't mean we have to take everything right at the first second, but we have to be open-minded to the idea that, yes, there may have been something that we grew up with that wasn't according to the halakha, and that now we're starting to learn and educate, and that's what life is. Life is about changing. Life is about growing and evolving, right? Anybody have anything else to, yeah?
I think it's also important with the child to learn it with them. Like meaning, their kid could come to you and say something out of the blue that has nothing to do with our way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a father or a mother to say, like, let's learn it together.
Right.
it helps both sides.
Absolutely. I think the first thing that's so important is when, let's talk about a child for a minute. A child comes to us and says, I learned this in school. It's so important not to be dismissive, right? If your first reaction is, well, that's not, no, we don't do that. You sort of backhandedly get rid of it. Well, first of all, that's not creating much of an environment where our children want to learn with us, right? Or share with us. And every one of us wants our children to come home from school and share with us. Of course, they don't, right? And we have to figure that out. By the way, I like to give a little tidbit. How many people, when their children come home from school, you start peppering them with questions? Raise your hand. Yeah. Yeah. What'd you eat for lunch? Where'd you go? Who'd you sit next to? Was the teacher nice? What'd you learn? Yeah. How many words do your kids give you when you give those types of questions? Yeah. Maybe 0, maybe 1, 3 if you're lucky, right? A good technique, I learned it when I was a teacher in Pirke, and I've tried to implement it with my children. Works sometimes, doesn't work always. Don't ask them questions. Tell them stories. When they come home from school, if you want to know, did they wear their hat and gloves in recess today? Don't ask them, did you wear your hat and gloves in recess today? You might get an answer, you might not, right? You know what you should say? I walked outside today, it was really, really cold. I had to wear my hat and gloves. Just leave that. I guarantee you, your child will respond to you and will say, oh yeah, when I went outside too today, oh, it was cold. And you know what happened? The more it did this, and all of a sudden you open up. Because just think about it from a logical standpoint, right? How many times have you been at a wedding, somebody comes up to you, starts throwing questions at you? You've had this before? How long do you want to stay in that conversation? Right? I want the heck, I mean, that's it. I don't want to, I'm not here to be interrogated by somebody. I don't feel comfortable when someone starts peppering questions. It's not an interview, right? So why would you think that our children want to be that? Our children don't want to be interviewed every single day that they get home from school. They want to have a conversation. They want to talk to us. They want us to tell them what our day was like and what we did. And then they'll respond with what they did. And now we're having a conversation. That's a better way, a better approach. I'm not saying it'll always work, but a different way of thinking about things if you want to try to get our children to open up a little bit. Where was I before this? I forgot now, right? I said, don't be dismissive, right? If we want our children to share, and we want them to feel comfortable to tell us what they learned in school, we cannot simply tell them dismissive, say, wow, that's really interesting. I never learned that before. Can you tell me where you learned that, right? Communication. Oh, I'm interested. I'd love to follow up with you more because I learned it a little bit differently. Maybe there's another way to look at it. If we show our children that we're intrigued by what they have to share and we're willing to learn it with them, as Honey said, now all of a sudden we open up lines of communication and there's a feeling like I can rely on my parent for something. I don't feel like we're playing me against you, but we're really in line with it. We're together. I try to coach a lot of young men and women in this issue when they get sent to Israel for the year, right? And that's one in our community. I'm looking around at faces, many people either have children about to have that decision or have already made that decision. And so if anybody has any experience, you'd be happy to share. But a lot of times young teens will come back to us and say, look, I just spent a year in Israel. I learned X, Y, and Z, and now I'm coming back home. And I'm not so sure how I'm going to handle the situation with my family. My family doesn't do what I've now learned and been inspired to want to do. And the first thing that I would always tell them is you have to know what you're talking about. You have to come from knowledge. You have to come from a position of strength, right? So I give the following analogy. If somebody was smoking around me and I asked them, can you please not smoke around me? It's harmful to me. Would they be needing to kind of respect my decision? Would you say that that's a reasonable request? Yes. Why? Why is it reasonable? Maybe the other person could say, well, I don't care about you. Go take a hike. I want to do what I want to do. Because when the person asks you not to smoke and says it's harmful to me, they're coming from a position of strength. They've obviously relying on the scientific evidence, the doctor's statements, everything that they've read about it. So we know today, after decades of studying smoking and knowing more about it, that this is harmful. So it's not an unreasonable request to ask somebody to not smoke in your presence because it's harmful. You're coming from a position of strength. And that person knows you're coming from a position of strength. So they may not be, love the idea, but they can respect it at least and meet you where you need to be met. The same goes for a religious request. If a child comes home and says, Mom, you're not allowed to let the housekeeper cook the food. You need to be the one to cook the food, right? And I won't eat unless you cook the food. Well, the next question that has to come back to the child is, well, tell me what you know about that, right? Have you learned up the issue? Have you investigated the different approaches and opinions? Do you know all of the different cases? Or was this just something that you heard? A rabbi said it out of context in a class or whatnot, and now you're coming home and saying that I have to go ahead and do this. Are you speaking from a position of strength or speaking from a position of weakness? And I always tell the young boys and girls, if you're going to bring something like that, you have to speak from a position of strength. And chances are, knowledge is power. If you start to think and you start to learn about the Torah and its ways and its laws, you'll realize that there's a way to coexist. Oftentimes, the reason why we butt heads with our neighbors who might be observing something slightly different than us, or other family members who observe slightly different than us, is because we really don't know much about it. We really haven't studied the idea. We really don't know what it is. So this one keeps Bet Yosef and this one keeps Glot. Anybody here? How many people by show of hands know what the difference is? Right? But all of a sudden, this is creating waves in our homes. This family member won't eat by me. That person won't go to this person. We don't even know what we're talking about. But somehow or another, it divides us and it creates friction and tension between us and our families and in our community. But we don't even know anything about it, right? And I would contest, it's because we know nothing about it that it does have the ability to do that. Because if we knew more about it, if we studied it, if we understood it better, if we knew what it was and where it comes from and what the different rabbinic opinions are about it, guess what? That would all of a sudden bridge the gap that is created by us. Because those who are holding to the stricter opinion would understand, why am I doing that? Maybe there's room for wiggle in this situation when it's a matter of dividing my family. When my sister invites me over for a holiday meal and I want to go over there and we want to be a family together, and I tell her we can't because of X kashrut reason, is that really something worth creating a division in our family? Or maybe is there something here that I'm missing that I need to learn a little bit more about that will help me to bridge the gap? Are we looking to divide or are we looking to create bridges? And that is really the whole perspective. And people who study the issues in depth, those are the ones I think who have the tools to bridge the gaps. It's our ignorance that actually creates us having this major separation one to the other. Elise, yeah.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but that's when you have wiggle room. If you go to someone's house and they're I don't keep calling Israel. I don't feel that it's anything that, okay, but other people do. So like Julie said, when people come, I do have the milk, I do have the butter. If my mom comes, I have everything.
Right.
But what about something that somebody that is, you don't have that wiggle room. It's yes or no. You cannot eat at that person's house because it's a law. It's
right.
Not, and you do know the law.
Right. So yes, 100%. There's not everything is flexible. Not everything can be compromised on, right? And so that already now presents a new set of challenges. But I would venture to say at first step, a lot of the things that I think create tension from my experience in handling questions, oftentimes people don't realize how much gray area there is within the halakha and how much they can make work. And I'll just go back and then I'll come up to address your point. I'll come back to the idea of, I'll just come back to the idea of, let's say, the housekeeper cooking in the home, right? So what I try to tell people is I say, well, wait a minute. If a housekeeper cooks in the home, but you turned on the oven, right? There's now a lot more room to be lenient in such a situation. How do we eat in restaurants? Most of our restaurants have non-Jews cooking in the kitchen. The Jew comes in and turns on the fire. They rely on his double doubt, and I won't go into the whole thing. We'll leave that for one of the JSOR classes about who can cook, but there's what to rely on in that situation. So I immediately would tell the young teen, I'd say, look, your job right now is to work within a framework of halakha that can best make you and your parents get along. You don't live in your own home. When you live in your own home, you can set the rules however you want. Right now, you live in someone else's home. You live with your parents. Is a major law in our Torah. It is a hallmark of what Judaism represents. The ways of Judaism are peace. So let's see what you want to accomplish here. What do you want to accomplish? Some people want to accomplish that they want to look very religious. If you want to look very religious, you can make fights all day long and you look very religious and you come out looking very religious, right? And that's what there are some people who like to really do that, right? They relish that opportunity. And those are people who I would argue are not peaceful people. They want to make fighting because that fight allows them to look more religious than other people. And that's not my way. That's not the way that I would advocate anybody to do. That's not a goal. What are you accomplishing? You're accomplishing, in my opinion, something worse than following the halakha. You're doing worse. You think you're following the halakha, you're making fighting, you're making tension, you're turning other people off to Judaism. You're doing much more harm than good. The rabbis say, all the reward you think you're getting for keeping that law, it all goes out the window, and chances are you're doing a lot more detrimental than you think you're doing good. So right now, the young teen, they live in their parents' home. You have to respect and honor your parents, and you have to find a way within that framework through your knowledge, and knowledge is power, to operate within that system. And you know what will happen? Your parents will start to say, wow, look at my young teen. They're able to be who they are, and they respect me. They give me the right, the time of day. They give me honor. They don't make fights. Wow. I'm seeing a different child. It's because they became more religious. Let me find out a little bit more. All of a sudden, the parent starts to soften up. All of a sudden, the parent becomes a little bit more tolerant. And this is what we try, is what at least I try, and many others that I know, to coach the young and the youth in being able to do this. And then when you go out and make your own home, by all means, go for it. I learned this lesson myself in a very interesting story. So one year I ate the seder by my parents' house, and I don't particularly love wine. I'm a big grape juice person, but grape juice, there's an idea that on the night of the seder you should have non-cooked wine, not wine that's mevushal. Right? Anybody ever heard of this idea? Non-mevushal wine. So every year around Pesach time, Kedem comes out with a line of grape juice that's non-mevushal. It's the one with the big wide thing and the thin neck. It's a glass bottle. You've seen it before. Always around Pesach time, Kedem starts to release them. And I told my mother, I said, Mom, I do only the grape juice because I only have like one glass of wine. I don't really like it so much. I said, I'm going to do the mevushal wine. And I went out and I bought my own. I thought I was being a hero. I went out and I bought my own non-mevushal wine, and I brought it to my mother's house. And she said, no, my mother's a tzaddiket. She's like, I'll buy it for you. I said, no, I want to make it easy for you. I don't want to inconvenience you. Meanwhile, the whole thing was an inconvenience for my mother. Now she's got to find another spot in the fridge to keep it. And Grace knows my mother. So it's a hard, it's you're asking, okay, but she was very good about it. She was the best egg about it. So I ended up putting it in. I put it in the refrigerator. The night comes, I'm pouring. I feel so proud. And I'm totally viewing myself as better than everyone else. I went and I took the thing and I put it here in the front of the table to make a statement that I'm better than all of you. I'm very happy to admit it. I was like 26. I said, see this bottle? I'm better than all of you. Better than everybody here. I'm drinking from this thin neck bottle, right? And I start to pour the cups and I'm drinking it. Now I don't finish the whole bottle. It's a gigantic bottle. I'm the only one. So I put the bottle back in the refrigerator. What do you think happened? Next day, my mother sets the whole table. I come home from shul. We're eating first lunch, right, by my mother. And I come in and the housekeeper is pouring everybody's grape juice around the table. My mom has all the little shaga, every single person with the thin-necked grape juice, right? And now I'm sitting there going, oh boy. My mom's not gonna be happy about this. Now I go to my dad, I said, Dad, we gotta throw out all the grape juice. He's like, all right, we're not gonna tell mommy. We're not gonna tell mommy. We're gonna decoy, she's playing cards, something like that. We're not gonna tell mommy. Grace knows, I'm not gonna pull that wool over my mother's eyes. Not gonna know in a million years, right? We take like 3 cups off the table to start. Who's touching the table? Who's touching the table? Why are you in there? So we ended up having to tell her, and I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed, right? I put my mother in a very predicament, and it was at that moment that I said, is this all really worth it? Was it all really worth it, right? In the end of the day, my mitzvah the night before, I think was bupkis, 0, as my grandma says. It's nothing. Why? It was purely an arrogant move. I wanted to look very religious in front of all my brothers. I'm the rabbi, I'm this and that. It was not for the purposes of really feeling like I was doing something great. I was trying to promote myself over everybody else. It was not a mitzvah that was done purely with no ulterior motive. So A, I didn't get credit for that mitzvah. B, I almost caused an entire family of people to make a violation the following day when they all drank from the other grape juice. I said, was this really worth it? Was it worth inconveniencing my mother for something which, when you look in the books, is perfectly acceptable? It's perfectly fine. I said, that's the last time. I ended up having 2 more sidarim by my mother before I moved to Jersey. Mom, whatever grape juice you get is fine. And she called me back the following year after the debacle. What a sadeket my mother was. After everything that I did, she called me back. She said, "You want me to get you that other grape juice?" I said, "No, Mom, don't get me the other grape juice. It's fine. I'm going to drink whatever you have. I'll drink the wine. I'll do this. I'll do that. It's not a problem." It was not a peaceful move. It was not a peaceful act. It was not meant to bring people together. It was not meant to enjoy the seder the way that it was. And I had to go through that experience to sort of come to that realization. Yeah, Julie.
You put your money where your mouth is. If you're the person who wants to make changes and people around you don't want. There could be 1,000 examples, but if you're somewhere and it's not college jobs like fighting with your mother, you cannot eat the pizza or not eat the big city quietly instead of making a stink. Like I've had experiences where we're in someone's house where, let's say, the gibbon wasn't checked or the salad wasn't checked. You just don't have to put that on your plate. Or if you're set, people have no problem not eating things in someone's house because they're on a diet, because they're vegan.
Right.
But the minute it's a kosher issue, they have to make a stink about it.
Right.
Just don't eat that item.
Right.
You can fill your plate with other things, or like I had a friend whose family drove on Shabbat and she chose that she's not going to do it anymore. And she could fight with them and start a war, or she just chose to stay home every Friday night when they went out.
Right.
And not, I think when things are done, like this person who comes home and tells his mother that the maid can't cook. Are you willing to fry your own eggs? Are you willing to come up with your own alternative?
Absolutely. So definitely another thing that we coach. I had one situation one time where I had a young man who came back from Israel and said, "Rabbi, I'm nervous." This was one candies of where there was no flexibility really. He said, "Rabbi, none of the dishes in my parents' house are dipped. None of them. My family never dipped dishes. There's been community families. No, people didn't dip dishes." He says, "I went to Israel. I studied. I learned. I talked to." He said, "My family's house is not dipped. What do I do?"
I thought you're allowed to eat on dishes if you don't own them. You have the obligation to dip. That's what I was told.
No. Even many people, Chacham Obadiah writes that it's hard to accept an invitation to a home of somebody who doesn't dip their dishes, right? It becomes a bit of an issue. So look, sometimes the halacha, there are ways around, there aren't ways around. There's certain wiggles. Okay, so I knew that was gonna launch everybody for 1 second. Which was? Correct. That's exactly what I told the young man. And so maybe I retold him the story, right? Right. So in this, I wasn't suggesting that you should go tell the other person to do it necessarily, right? But in this particular situation, I told the young man, I said, okay, so what are you going to do about it? He's like, well, I don't want to tell my mom and my parents. I said, you know what you should do? You should tell mom, this is what I learned. This is what I'm going to do. On Sunday, you and dad go to the mall for 6 hours and I'm going to take every dish. I'm going to take every dish out of the cupboard and I'm going to dip it myself, right? And if you can't do that, if you're not willing to do that, then you don't really believe in it. That's what Julie's saying. You don't really believe in it. You want it to be that they do it for you and you don't really believe in it. If you're willing to, if this is something that's so important to you, then you have to go ahead and put your money where your mouth is and tell your parents, I'm going to be the one to do it. Now, if a parent says you're not allowed to take my dishes and dip them, even if it's for me, now we have a little bit more of attention. Now we got to see somebody who's a little bit more capable than myself. And we have to figure out something because now there's something a little bit deeper at the core. Now you have a situation where a parent is so stubborn, they're not even willing to help or appease their own child who they sent to yeshiva. Why'd you send them to yeshiva in the first place, right? In something that they can go ahead and do, right? So, but if you're willing to take that step, if you're willing to take that initiative, and you're willing to go that extra mile, that's what's going to bridge the gap. That's what it means in our Mishnah when it says that you're ohev shalom verodef shalom. If you really want peace, if you really want people to be together, and peace on a religious level is so critical to us being able to conduct our lives in the right way, you have to love that peace and you have to chase that peace. You have to be willing to do the work yourself. You have to be willing to go that extra mile. You have to be willing to do that sacrifice. And that's what you have to show in order to send the message that this is something that you really believe in. And most of the time, when you take that effort and you show how far you're willing to go, other people say, I'm willing to respect it. I'm not always willing to do it. I can't always change my ways, but at least I can have a level of respect. And once you have mutual respect for each other, now you're much closer towards the situation of shalom. Shalom doesn't mean everybody has to do the same thing. That's never going to happen. nor should it happen. Part of the beauty of Judaism is that there's always debate and differences and arguments, but done respectfully, seeing the person for the other side of what they're coming from, seeing your side from where you're coming from. And when there's a mutual understanding that's brought out from knowledge, now you have a bridge which two people can go ahead and walk on, right? I saw a few heads up. Yeah. What would I say about a teenage boy at shul? He doesn't want to go, and you want him to go. Right. So who said don't push? Yeah, you said don't push, right? It's hard to make a generalization. It really depends on the particulars of the boy, who they are, where they've been, what they've done. It depends on their personality. You know, some young men need to be pushed. My mom's not pushing me, my dad's not pushing me, I'm not going anywhere, right? They want to be pushed by the parents because they want to see if the parent really cares about it or not. Other times, children want to be very standoffish. They want to be like, I'll get there when I get there. And you pushing them is only pushing them down towards worse. So you really have to understand your child. I don't know that I can, and I feel like I'm sorry if it feels like I'm copping out of the question, but I don't think you can make a generalization about how you should treat. Some people need to be pushed, some people need to be backed off, and some people need to have a little bit of both, right? A little bit sometimes, and then a little, you have to kind of read the situation. As parents, we have to sometimes read our children, their moods, what's going on in their life to know when we should put a little more pressure on them, when they need a little bit of space, right? And you're the best, you're empowered to do that. You know your child best, you know what their personality is better than us, right? But in typical fashion, you know what the rabbis always say, when you're trying to get someone to come to you, you got to push with the right and pull in with the left a little. You have to do a little bit of both, right? You have to make them feel like they're responsible, they're accountable, but at the same time, they have to feel that love. They have to feel that kirva, that closeness in order to make it happen, right? I want to tell you one quick story that they bring about Aharon, because we mentioned Aharon as the person. It says that Aharon was a striver of peace. He chased after peace, and that allowed him to bring people close to the Torah. How did he do that? He befriended people. He connected with them, right? He showed them love despite everything that they may have been or not been doing, right? So the rabbis say that when a person saw that Aharon, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, the holiest man in the nation, was friendly with them, was greeting them with a smile, was showing them love, they said, how could I go afterwards and do something wrong? How could I cheat that person in business? How could I lie to that person? How could I commit this transgression? Aharon, the Kohen Gadol, is my friend. What would he say about me? What would he think about me? What would he look about me? When we show people that love and we bring them close and we shower them with that, and love can look like a few different things. Love doesn't always have to be let them do whatever they want. That's oftentimes, by the way, not love, right? Sometimes there are children who are screaming out for boundaries, right? When you let them do whatever they want, that's actually the word, not love to them at all. They want to be framed by their parents. They want to show their parent cares about them. When a parent lets a child do whatever they want, they say, all right, my parent doesn't care about me. I can do whatever I want, right? So love can be shown in a lot of different ways. But when the child feels like my parent cares about me and is showing me that genuine love, or my rabbi cares about me, or my spiritual advisor cares about me, whoever it might be that they look up to, that will be the most important catalyst at them coming closer to religion or doing anything that they want to do in life that's going to help to make them successful. It's all about showing them that love. That's what Aharon HaKohen did. It's funny, the question comes up, why Aharon and not Moshe? Right? Moshe was the leader of the Jewish people. Why is Aharon the beacon of peace and Moshe not? So much so, by the way, that when Moshe passed away, it says that they cried for him for 30 days. When Aharon passed away, it says that the whole Jewish people cried for him for 30 days. You know what the rabbis say? The women and the children also cried when Aharon passed away. They didn't cry when Moshe passed away. So what are you talking about? They didn't cry when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away? The answer is that Moshe Rabbeinu was the lawgiver. He was the judge. He was the one who had to be tough. He couldn't befriend everybody because of the position that he had. And so he couldn't get in with everybody. He couldn't become everybody's best friend. It would undermine his ability to govern the people. Aharon didn't have that position. Aharon was the server of God. He was the one that everybody came to the Beit HaMikdash and Guy comes with his head down and he says to Aharon, here I have a korban. And Aharon says, well, why do you have a korban? Well, I did this and that and I made a mistake. Okay, don't worry about it. I'm going to sacrifice your korban and we're going to do teshuvah. And then I'm going to call you a week later and I'm going to find out if you did the avera again. And if you did, we're going to do it again. And we're going to go over. Aharon was in a unique position to create bonds of love, a relationship with people. And that's why he was the one who was able to chase the peace and to make the peace, because he had that level of connection with the people that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't have. And that's why when he passed away, everybody cried for the loss of Aharon, the women and the children, because he had made peace between spouses and he had made peace between children and their parents, and he made peace between neighbors. He did it all based on the position that he occupied. Questions or other thoughts that people may have had? Yeah, can you?
When the laws are taught with all of the punishments, they do come home and say, you have to, because they're scared. It's not in a way where, this is what you should do, there's wiggle room, or
Right.
I guess maybe the fear of whatever they're being taught. I know
Sure.
boys are being taught harsher than girls, and maybe that's why they push so hard.
Sure. So, I mean, for me, I can't speak for everybody. We can't not teach them the consequences. The Torah has consequences in it. And the Torah gives those consequences because, I'm just making sure I don't go, the Torah gives those consequences because it wants us to show why things are important or not. When the Torah says that a particular action like violating Shabbat is the death penalty, that sends a powerful message to us, right? When something is a little bit of a lesser punishment, it helps put things into perspective. So we have to teach the punishments. I think what typically has to come with that is an understanding that the consequences are to help us understand how important this is, how fundamental it is to Judaism. But it's not meant to instill in us fear, right? It's not meant to imprison us into the Torah. That's where we have to teach the other side of the mitzvah, which is the richness of the mitzvah. What this mitzvah can help me gain in my life. What does observing Shabbat help me benefit? What does honoring my parents give to me in my life, right? It's funny, the rabbis say that there are some mitzvot that when you do the mitzvah, you get fruits in this world and you also get the principal reward in the next world. You know, huh? What are one of those mitzvot that is mentioned there? Kibud Avayim is there. Keep going, Julie. Remember? Hava'at Shalom. Hava'at Shalom ben Adam lachavero or ben ish l'ishto. One of those mitzvot that gives you that eternal reward, both in this world and in the next, is bringing peace between a husband and a wife, bringing peace between two people. And that peace, like we said, can have many different things, because when you teach somebody that ultimately keeping that peace, keeping that respect, keeping that love, if you have that, everything else can fall into place. Everything else can lock in if you have that as the core of everything that you have in your Judaism. I'll end with one more story. And of course, this conversation can continue. I hope it does. But one more story is told about a rabbi. His name was Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir had a practice where he would give a lecture every Friday night. And there was one woman who particularly liked to come and hear Rabbi Meir's lecture. He would give very elaborate lectures. And this one woman came one time to the lecture, and Rabbi Meir went overtime. He went long. And the woman came home late on Friday night, and the candles had already gone out. They were in the dark. They had no candles to sit down and eat the meal. And the husband got really, really angry at his wife. Notice the husband didn't go to the class, the wife went to the class, right? So the husband got really upset. And the husband took an oath. He said, you're not allowed back in the house until you spit in the face of the rabbi who gave the class. Now, first of all, that's not proper conduct on the part of any husband to intimidate his wife. That goes without saying. But the wife said, Anna, what am I supposed to do now? Rabbi Meir found out about it. He went over to this woman and he feigned an eye problem. And he said, the only way, excuse me, miss, the only way I can repair my eyes is if somebody spits in my eyes 7 times. And the woman said, I can't do it. You're the right. She says, no, it's good. Do it. And she spits in his eyes. And he says to her at the end, he says, now go back to your husband and say, you wanted me to spit once in the eye of the rabbi? I did it 7 times in the eyes of the rabbi. And the Rabbi Meir's students were livid. They watched this episode take place. They said, Rabbi, how can you do such a thing? And Rabbi Meir had a genius response to them. He said, if God is willing to erase his own name to make peace between a husband and wife, who am I to not let someone spit in my face to make peace between a husband and wife? When does God erase his name to make a peace between a husband and wife? Isha sota, right? The woman who is suspected by her husband of committing infidelity, and she's being tried, and she drinks the waters, and God allows his name to be erased. It's one of the 10 commandments. It's a violation of the Torah. God says, I don't care. If this will prove the woman's innocence and bring the husband and wife back together, worth it for me to go ahead and do that. Rabbi Meir said, if Hashem could do that, how much more so can I do that? And so really the last thing I leave you with is, if we want to be peaceful people in anything that we do, religion and anything else, it means that we have to be willing to push ourselves aside to make room for the other person. We have to be willing to erase our name and allow ourselves to be disrespected, all in the name and for the sake of creating peace. Because why doesn't peace happen? Because people stand on ceremony. I'm not going to be the one to debase myself. They need to apologize to me. I don't need to apologize to them. I did nothing wrong. They did the thing that was wrong. We stand in our ceremony, we hold in our corner, and we say, I'm not going to do anything that's going to make me look bad. It's them who has to do it. We don't see the situation from their perspective. We don't take a step back and say, what did I maybe do to contribute to this situation? We blame everything outward on them. We point the finger instead of a thumb. Says the Pirke Abot, if you want to be like Aharon, you have to chase the peace and you have to love the peace so much so that you're willing to erase yourself. You're willing to put yourself in the back seat in order to promote the other individual. And when you think you're losing in that way, you're gaining so much more. You could take a back seat temporarily. You'll make peace between them. You'll gain and you'll come out so far ahead. You ever wonder why you held on to those feelings of animosity, of vengeance, of begrudging the other person? Why did I ever hold on to them? Why did I hold on to them for so long? I just had a case, unfortunately, there was an individual who called me up and said, Rabbi, that somebody lost their father, and I want to pay respects to them, but I haven't spoken to the person in a year. I haven't spoken to them. We've had our differences. I'm afraid to go and pay respects to them. I'm nervous they'll throw me out of the house. Could you imagine something like that? Person's going to console somebody else at their time of loss, trying to grieve and bring them together. And he says, you're going to throw me out of the house. I said, if you really feel that that could potentially happen, then don't go visit, because you don't want to create that situation. I said, but I have a feeling that you'll be fine. I have a feeling if you put your head between your tails for just a minute, come in and apologize, come in a humble, contrite way, the other person has already been humbled with the loss of his relative. You'll meet the two together. And that's what happened. When both parties can humble themselves, put themselves in the back seat a little bit, that's where shalom comes. And a week later, the person called me and said, I now have a great relationship with this person. We're back on. I can't believe it took me a year to even come to that and get to that. So we shouldn't wait for some tragedy to happen before we could bridge the gap. Put ourselves in the second position, humble ourselves, see it from someone else's perspective, chase and love that peace, and find within the framework of whatever it is that you're doing a way to come together, and you'll see that yourself get much ahead. You'll see tremendous beracha and hatzlacha, because nothing is greater than having peace in this world. Amen.